Okay. Aren't most things better raw? My name is Emily, and I'm going to discuss the topic of raw milk versus pasteurized milk. So today, a lot of people prefer eating natural products or drinking natural products such as raw milk. And this, I think, is because if you watch TV or you get on the internet, there's a lot of different places that prefer to push eating natural products because it is known to be more healthy for you. Well, today I'm going to talk to you about raw milk and kind of the benefits and bad things of raw milk. And then I'm going to tell you about pasteurized milk. And I hope that at the end of the presentation, you'll be able to decide for yourself whether you think that raw milk is a better choice for someone's diet or pasteurized milk. Now, before I get into really discussing raw milk and pasteurized milk, I want to push how big of a controversy this is. So out of the 17 out of the 50 states, they have made the selling of raw milk illegal. And 11 out of 50 states, raw milk is allowed to be sold, but it's not in the form of cow raw milk. You can only sell it in the form of goat and sheep milk. And then the other states that aren't included in this aren't just like selling it wherever or not selling it. Each state has specific regulations on how you can sell raw milk or who you can sell it to and where you can sell it. So I hope this gives you an idea of how big of a controversy raw milk versus pasteurized milk is. Now I want to start off talking about what exactly raw milk is. It is obviously not pasteurized. It is milk that comes directly from cows, sheep, and goats. It contains bacteria, and some of these are Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, and these bacteria are bad for you, and they have been known to cause foodborne illness in people that have drinking raw milk, or there are other products. If you eat raw eggs, that can cause, or those things can happen as well. Now, not only does raw milk contain bad bacteria, but it also contains good bacteria. Now, some of these include lactobacillus, which is known to help reduce lactose intolerance, lower blood cholesterol, and increase specific immune responses, and it does many other things. Another bacteria that is in raw milk is known as streptococcus, and it helps improve digestion and it enhances immunity. Now, another good bacteria is Enterococcus, and it helps protect against infection and relieve diarrhea. Now, the reason I want to kind of discuss the different good bacteria and the different bad bacteria is a lot of people today get the misconception that bacteria is all bad for you completely. Well, that's obviously not the case. In raw milk, there is good bacteria, and it helps with things like infection or diarrhea or immunity. So it's important to really keep in mind that raw milk does have good bacteria as well. Now, there are also different dietary sources in raw milk. For instance, there is vitamin D, which helps bones absorb calcium. There's protein, which gives you energy and helps repair and build muscles. Potassium, which regulates fluids in your body. Vitamin B12, which builds red blood cells that carry oxygen throughout your body. And vitamin A, which aids in vision. And riboflavin, which converts food into energy. And then finally, it also has calcium in it, which can help build strong bones. So as you can see, raw milk has really good dietary sources within it as well that help the body kind of function in different ways. So now that you know kind of exactly the different components of raw milk, I want to talk about the process of pasteurization. Now, pasteurization is when you take the raw milk and you heat it to a temperature between 63 and 73 degrees Celsius, and this will go on for a certain amount of time. Now, when I say that, I don't mean like hours or minutes. This normally is like just a few seconds. It's not like a super long time. And what pasteurization does is it basically kills the bacteria that is found in raw milk. Now, not only does it kill the bad bacteria, but it also kills the good bacteria that I talked about earlier. Now, when talking about pasteurization, the one that I'm talking about is the typical pasteurization. There are different types of pasteurization and different ways of doing things. So I'm going to kind of go into list some of the few different ones. But in this picture you see on the slide, this is the machine that they use to convert raw milk into pasteurized milk. And there are different types, but this is just one form that I found. Now on this slide, I am showing you a few of the different types of pasteurization. At the bottom, at 118 degrees, it shows that the enzymes begin to denature through pasteurization. The second to the bottom is the low temperature pasteurization, and this happens when enzymes and proteins remain intact when milk is heated below these temperatures. Then you have high temp pasteurization, which kills the enzymes and much of the healthy microorganisms and also denatures the proteins. And this milk has been difficult to digest. And as you can see, it says danger in there because it can be difficult to digest, and you kind of get into those things that you should be careful about and be more know about them. And then lastly, on the top, you have ultra pasteurization, which kills potentially harmful bacteria in the milk, but also damages all of the vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients originally contained in the milk. And this would be, for example, the calcium, riboflavin, all the different nutrients that I talked about before when we talked about raw milk. Okay, so now that you know what pasteurization is, I want to talk about pasteurized milk. So obviously, as I mentioned before, through pasteurization, you get rid of the bacteria in the raw milk. Now, this isn't just the bad bacteria that causes foodborne illness, but this is also the good bacteria that helps with the immune system and all those kinds of things. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is that even though it does get rid of, like, the good bacteria is important, getting rid of the bad bacteria is also important as well. Now, another thing to keep in mind is when you go through the process of pasteurization, you're getting rid of you're depleting some of the nutrients as well. So like calcium, riboflavin, those things will be depleted. They're not going to completely be out of the milk, but they're going to be in lower amount than they were in the raw milk because of the heat and the time that it was heated and then cooled afterwards. So you're going to be depleted on those nutrients. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Through my research, I found that even though you are depleted in these nutrients in the pasteurized milk, Americans and other people have such wide variety of diets that we're getting all these nutrients from other types of foods that are available to us. So even though we're depleted when drinking the pasteurized milk from these nutrients, you're still bringing in all these nutrients from other foods. So they say that your diet isn't really as depleted in these nutrients just because the milk is depleted in it. So that's something to keep in mind as well when drinking pasteurized milk. Another thing I want to kind of discuss is that the FDA does say that pasteurized milk is healthier for people to drink just because it doesn't have the bacteria, and it's safer for the children and pregnant women, most importantly, because as a pregnant woman or a child, you're developing, and you don't want to get a foodborne illness or sickness from the bad bacteria that can be in raw milk. So now I'm going to go over a case study that I found while researching. Now, because we all know like milk is lactose and all those things, they combine. So one of the biggest things that I found when researching was that they believe that raw milk really helped with lactose intolerance and helped the symptoms of lactose intolerance and kind of make them a little better and not as strong. So before I kind of talk about my case study, I wanted to make sure you knew exactly what lactose intolerance was. So in the picture, as you can see, you have normal lactose digestion. So you're going from lactose and converting to lactase, which then will go into glucose and galactose. Now, when you're lactose intolerant, the lactose won't convert into the lactase, so you can't go into glucose and galactose. So bacteria will be fermented in the body, which causes a buildup of gas and acids, which will normally cause abdominal pain or diarrhea or other problems within the digestive system. So that's basically kind of what the difference between the two digestions are. Now, in this case study, what they did was they wanted to prove whether or not this theory was true, that raw milk does help with lactose intolerance. So they took 16 people and had them go through phases. So the first phase was 8 days, and the participants were to drink a specific amount of raw milk each day for the 8 days. Now, during these 8 days, they wrote down all their symptoms and everything they felt and all that stuff. And then after the 8 days, they had a washout phase, where they drank soy milk to kind of get rid of the raw milk in the system. And during this phase, they also wrote down their symptoms and how they felt and all the different things like that. And so then after the 8-day phase of the soy milk, they had an 8-day phase where they drank pasteurized milk. And during this phase, again, they wrote down their symptoms and everything they felt. Now, at the end of the study, I have the picture of the different symptoms the main symptoms that all the people wrote down. And as you can see, between the raw milk and the pasteurized milk, the two, there's obvious one that's always a little higher than the other, but they're pretty same balanced as compared to the symptoms of the soy milk. So at the end of the study, they pretty much found out that raw milk really didn't have an effect on the lactose intolerance symptoms. Then they thought like the pasteurized and the raw milk really had the same effects, like they didn't affect it in any way different from what they actually thought. So I found that pretty interesting because a lot of the websites and the other articles that I found talked about how raw milk was such a better for you if you have lactose intolerance, and because the bacteria beneficial helps. But when they did this study, it really didn't have a huge effect. Now, in conclusion, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I really wanted you to know that the differences of raw milk and pasteurized milk and know the benefits and negatives of both. Because I feel like when you're planning your diet, you want to make sure that you're eating everything that's good for you and all the things that can really benefit your body. And to do that, you need to know all the different pros and cons of each thing that you're debating. So I hope, as you can see, they both have good and bad things. They both contain nutrients, so that's a plus. One is more depleted, one has more, one has less, one has bad bacteria, and one has good bacteria. So they both show greater sources. As I mentioned, though, the FDA does say that pasteurization milk is better for you just because it doesn't have the bad bacteria and you're not like succumbing yourself to getting the foodborne illness from the bad bacteria such as salmonella and E. coli. So you really want to think about that. So in conclusion, it's really up to you. Are natural things better for you or not? And there are my references, and thank you.